as time went on in my music career, my relationship and my deeper need to get closer with God came more and more to the forefront. And instead of fighting that or saying, like, I can't do that because that'll hurt my career, I didn't do any of that. I just said, hey, man, I'm going to follow my heart. Getting my master tapes back was, first of all, a great surprise, because that's not the easiest thing to do.
They gave us the groove, the hits, the blueprint. But behind Slave's funk was a story of ego, faith, and fallout. This isn't just about music. It's about what happens when the spotlight shifts and the soul wants out. Let's get into it. Slave was that band. If you were into funk, you knew they were the ones. Thick grooves, sharp hooks, and live shows that hit like a lightning bolt. But while the music sounded like one big happy jam session, things behind the scenes were messy. Real messy. Steve came in later, not part of the OG crew. He started out on drums, quiet in the back, but little by little, he crept toward the front. And once he grabbed the mic, it was game over. His falsetto was smooth, punchy, and impossible to ignore. Suddenly, Slave had a frontman. Fans were obsessed. Labels couldn't get enough. But not everyone in the band was clapping. The group had always been more of a squad, built by players like Stevie and Kurt, and vocalists like Starliana. It wasn't about one star, but once Steve started getting all the shine, people felt pushed to the side. Input got filtered, opinions got ignored, and it started feeling less like a crew and more like the Steve Show. And if the creative tension wasn't enough, the money stuff was a disaster. The business side? Pure chaos. Managers kept rotating, and nobody seemed to know who actually ran what. Steve, Kurt, and Starliana weren't even signed as official members. They were doing all the work, front and center in the studio, killing it on stage, but still getting treated like background extras. Paid like it too. They were making hits and still broke. So yeah, by the time they dropped their biggest record, the frustration had fully boiled over. Stevie stayed, but Kurt and Starliana dipped. Steve too. They broke off and started their own thing. Aura. Funked out freedom. More range. More women on the mic. No gatekeeping, no confusion about who mattered. Just music made on their own terms. They asked Steve to go with them when the others left, but he stayed put. Said he was riding with his Dayton crew, not chasing a new setup. That loyalty? Cute. But it didn't fix anything. Stevie was the brain behind so much of their sound. And once he bounced, something just shifted. The music didn't hit the same. The spark in the studio faded. They dropped another album, but even fans could tell things were off. Behind closed doors, it was chaos. New managers came and went like background extras. Contracts? A mess. Royalties? Confusing. The money side looked like someone threw it in a blender. Even though a lot of the music came from pure, organic jam sessions. Bass grooves from Mark, melodies from Steve, ideas bouncing around the room. There was zero structure protecting anyone. No one really knew who was getting what. Steve tried to stick it out, he really did. But over time, it just wasn't giving. The music wasn't feeding him anymore. The business wasn't either. He had his own sound in mind, stuff that didn't fit the Slave formula. So he dipped, started his own thing, finally calling the shots. Looking back, it wasn't about clout chasing or drama. It was what happens when creativity gets boxed in and nobody's getting the credit or the cash they deserve. Slave didn't crash overnight. It was slow, messy, and preventable. A quiet kind of fallout. If there's a lesson in all of it, it's this: a group only works when respect, control, and money are actually shared. Otherwise, it's just a ticking clock.
And as time went on in my music career, my relationship and my deeper need to get closer with God came more and more to the forefront.
When Steve left Slave, everyone thought he was just going solo. New band, new era, same groove, right? Not quite. What actually happened was a full-on shift. He dropped his own project, Hall of Fame, and yeah, it still slapped. Funky, jazzy, smooth falsetto, All of that, but if you really listened, the lyrics were different. More soul-searching, more questions, more God creeping in. It didn't take long before he stopped easing into it and just said it with his chest. He wasn't just making songs anymore. He was on a spiritual journey. And once he locked in, he wasn't trying to be low-key about it. He was full on in. No halfway, no filter.
Right.
It started with songs like Dancing in the Key of Life. Now, it had always been there, but it became more and more of the driving force of my life.
The label was confused. Friends were weirded out. People thought he was going through some temporary spiritual episode and would snap out of it. But Steve wasn't putting on a show. He meant it. Back home, folks were talking. People said he'd lost it. This was the same guy who'd been rocking stages with legends, now smashing his gold records like they were cursed objects. He literally took his Stone Jam plaque and destroyed it. Didn't want it in his space. Asked himself what was standing between him and his faith, and the answer was everything he'd built in music. So he let it all go. No goodbyes, no headlines, just dipped.
And instead of fighting that or saying, I can't do that because that'll hurt my career, I didn't do any of that. I just said, hey man, I'm going to follow my heart.
After a couple more albums on his own terms, he left the whole thing behind. No more music biz, no more press, no more anything. He got quiet, started traveling, played drums in churches, preached when he felt like it. No chart runs, no comeback plans. He wasn't out here chasing fame, he was chasing peace.
Because it was a small town and we knew each other those guys remember when I was playing pots and pans and, cats would come over from school and, we'd be hanging out playing football. Hey man, let's go get some popsicles or something, bro.
Steve didn't come out the gate as some superstar. He came up in Dayton, this regular gritty city that just happened to be a funk factory. We're talking legends on legends. Bands like Ohio Players, Zap, and Heatwave all came out of that same small pocket. And the public schools? Basically boot camps for future musicians. Their music programs went way harder than most colleges. Steve moved around a lot because of his family, but for senior year, he landed at Roth. That's where he met Mark, Tom, and Floyd. They started jamming together during 6th period, calling themselves the Young Mystics. It wasn't serious at first, just them messing around in the band room, but something clicked. Then Dayton's music scene kinda dried up. The indie labels went quiet, and a bunch of musicians dipped for California. Steve followed, linking with Coke Escovedo in the Bay, and eventually playing with Pete and Sheila E. It was a whole other sound, and Steve soaked it all in. But Dayton pulled him back in. Slave needed him, and the call came. He joined the crew first on tour, playing percussion. Then he slid into the drummer spot, then vocals. His West Coast flavor started blending into their Midwest funk, and suddenly the band had this wild new edge. Steve was open to anything. If it made sound, he'd try to make it groove. In the studio, Mark ran the show. His bass didn't just sit in the mix, it jumped out the speakers and grabbed your chest. He wasn't playing background, he was dragging the whole track forward. And Stevie, the producer, knew how to make each person sound like the best version of themselves. He didn't force anything, he just listened, picked up on what everyone did best, and built everything around that. The group had real chemistry. Steve, Starliana, and Kurt had totally different voices, but that's what made it work. Their blend didn't sound like anyone else. Slave wasn't the kind of band that started with a plan and filled in the blanks. They just jammed, messed around, and magic happened. Everyone brought something to the table, and they all knew they were onto something rare. After Steve left, he started Hall of Fame. Not just a new band, but a different energy entirely. He gave the background players the spotlight, and the sound was a full mashup of jazz, funk, gospel, and open-ended lyrics. One of the guys in that band, Kevin, even ended up leading the Tonight Show band later. That's the kind of talent Steve was pulling in. The label wanted him to just run it back, do another version of the hit. Same formula, different day. But Steve wasn't stuck on loop. He had moved on. He wasn't trying to be a product or ride past success. He wanted the music to reflect who he was becoming, not who he used to be. By the 2000s, Slave was basically a memory. The band that used to set dance floors on fire had faded into background chatter. Some of the crew moved on quietly, others just disappeared from the scene completely. But then, almost 2 decades after dipping from the industry, Steve felt that itch again. But Steve kept moving, still playing, still making music, still preaching, just with rhythm instead of sermons. His story had gone full circle, from rising star to disappearing act to wise old legend. The band may be mostly gone, but the groove they built? Still echoing through every new artist picking up a bass and chasing that same feeling. If their story taught anything, it was simple. Don't wait till folks are gone to show them love. Give them their flowers while they're still here to hold them.